General Motors just hit the pause button on a facility quite literally named Factory Zero. And I mean, that's the exact assembly line supposedly serving as the starting block for their entire electric vehicle future. Welcome to Auto News Talk. In this segment, we are looking at an auto industry attempting to, well, walk a high wire act in a windstorm.
A windstorm is putting it lightly.
Right. Because on one side, you've got automakers pushing these incredibly ambitious transitions to EVs. But then on the other side, sudden regulatory landmines are just squeezing the profit margins right out of local dealerships. And caught in the middle is this frantic race to figure out how to use artificial intelligence to actually, pay for all of this.
Yeah, the terrain we're walking through for you all listening is it's incredibly complex. To really understand the mechanics of this market, we need to trace the whole ecosystem from the top down. So we're going to examine the factory floors where legacy automakers are just abruptly tearing up their blueprints. Then we'll track how those shifts cascade right down to the dealership lots, where these financial and regulatory risks are looming larger than ever.
Yeah.
And finally, we'll take you into the executive boardroom, where a brand new, profit-first technology playbook is becoming, honestly, the ultimate survival tool.
And I think the absolute best place to start unpacking all this is right on the manufacturing floor. Because the dynamic right now, it feels like automakers built a massive multi-billion-dollar highway for electric vehicles, but consumers are insisting on taking the scenic route.
That's a great way to put it.
The reality check hitting the assembly lines is stark, especially when you look at the moves happening at General Motors.
Yeah, according to a really detailed report on manufacturing adjustments, automakers are actively hitting the brakes to align with softening consumer demand. GM's decision to pause production at Factory Zero is just a prime example of this. This pause temporarily halts the output of their flagship electric trucks. So we are talking about the Chevrolet Silverado EV, the GMC Sierra EV, and the GMC Hummer EV.
Which is wild because, Factory Zero is a name that implies a total commitment to a zero-emissions future. So hitting pause on those specific flagship models, that's a massive signal to the broader market.
It really is. And it affects roughly 1,300 workers.
Yeah.
But the same source points out this really fascinating counterbalance. While the EV lines are paused, GM is actually increasing the output of their heavy-duty internal combustion engine trucks.
Oh, wow. So they are just reverting straight back to the traditional gas-powered workhorses.
Exactly. They are leaning heavily on what actually sells in this specific economic environment. Although it is worth noting that union representatives at the plant still express long-term confidence in the EV transition, despite this current headwind.
Really? Even with the pause?
Yeah, they cite hopes that better charging infrastructure and, fluctuations in fuel prices will eventually bring buyers back to the electric models.
But just think about the mechanics of this for the people actually selling these vehicles. This adds immense logistical complexity for dealers. You have this cooling sales environment, and you suddenly have to completely rebalance your inventory between electric vehicles and traditional gas-powered trucks, basically on the fly.
It's a huge headache. And the missing puzzle piece in this reporting is the timeline. What this source doesn't answer is the schedule for a restart, or if GM intends to use this specific downtime for equipment upgrades or retooling. We just know the line is literally stopped.
I have to push back a bit on the overarching narrative, though, because is EV demand actually dead, or is it just, migrating? Because if you look away from the brand new luxury models rolling off the assembly lines and you look at the secondary market, it's a totally different picture.
It really is. The secondary market provides this fascinating twist. Data published by NextGear reveals that the used electric and hybrid vehicle market is practically surging right now.
Surge?
Yeah. This data highlights that funding for used electric vehicles jumped a staggering 157% year over year, and used hybrids went up 77%.
Wait, 157%. That is not just some minor statistical fluctuation. That is an absolute boom.
Right.
It suggests consumers are perfectly happy to buy an EV as long as someone else takes that massive initial depreciation hit.
The data absolutely supports that conclusion, and it's giving dealers incredible confidence. According to the NextGear metrics, average credit limits for dealers are actually up 28% overall.
Oh.
Yeah, and dealers are creating significantly fuller stocking plans. The volume of vehicles on those plans is increasing by over 11%. Plus, stock turn is remaining really steady, and the trading volume aligns perfectly with normal seasonal patterns.
So the rising flows of used EVs into the market are actually boosting dealer confidence and keeping the broader EV ecosystem alive, even while new sales stall out on the factory floor. It's like the secondary market is acting as a sponge, absorbing the demand that the primary market is just completely missing.
That's exactly what's happening. Though there is one blind spot in this data set. What the data doesn't answer is the regional breakdown of where these sales are actually happening, or the split between new customers entering the EV market versus existing EV owners just upgrading their older models.
Got it. So the EV market is wildly unpredictable. And if you are a legacy automaker, you have to find a way to insulate yourself. I mean, how do you protect your profit margins when you don't even know if consumers walking onto the lot want a brand new electric truck, a used hybrid, or a heavy-duty gas guzzler?
Well, you build a defensive wall using flexibility and domestic production. A strategic analysis of Mercedes-Benz outlines exactly how they are executing this exact playbook. They're committing a massive $4 billion investment into their Alabama manufacturing plant.
$4 billion poured into a single facility. That is a very serious defense strategy.
It is, and their goal is to hit a target of 400,000 U.S. sales. But they are attempting this while staring down some serious macroeconomic headwinds.
Like what?
Well, the analysis notes that elevated auto loan rates are elongating the time it takes for consumers to purchase premium vehicles. And furthermore, they're watching fuel prices really closely. Gas prices averaging just above $4 a gallon are considered manageable, but they note any sustained move toward $5 would severely dampen consumer demand.
Let's break down how a plant in Alabama actually solves those problems, though. Because by localizing production, they dodge international tariffs, right? They mitigate all those complex transoceanic shipping logistics, and they gain the agility to build what the market actually wants without a 6-month lead time.
Exactly. And they're putting that agility to use by refreshing their core SUV lineups, specifically the GLS and the GLE. This is to help sustain showroom traffic. And crucially, they are building the new GLE 53 hybrid right there in Alabama.
See, building the hybrid domestically makes perfect sense. You have a vehicle that bridges the gap between gas and electric, and by manufacturing it locally, you can pivot production numbers up or down if gas prices spike or if EV demand softens further. And obviously, you entirely avoid the import taxes.
Exactly. And there's one really memorable detail from the strategic analysis that highlights how Mercedes handles the pressure of higher tariffs on the vehicles they still do import. To protect their market share, they have limited their U.S. price increases to exactly 1.3%.
Wait, really? Just 1.3?
Yeah, they are willingly eating the extra tariff costs just to keep consumers buying.
Wow. So they are just absorbing those costs to protect their footprint. But the strategic outlook kind of leaves an open question, doesn't it? Like what this analysis doesn't answer is whether Mercedes can actually hit that 400,000 sales target if broader SUV demand just falters across the board.
Right. That is the multi-billion-dollar vulnerability for them. And, while automakers are restructuring their entire global footprints to protect their margins, the local dealerships are facing a margin threat of their own. And this particular threat is coming entirely out of left field. Massive regulatory blowback.
It feels like the dealers are playing a high-stakes game of financial musical chairs. Because when the regulatory music stops, the dealer is usually the one left holding the bill.
That analogy perfectly captures the Motor Finance Redress Plan organized by the Financial Conduct Authority, or FCA, over in the UK. A legal review of this situation warns that dealers have significant financial exposure.
Okay, to understand the mechanics here, what is the regulator actually doing?
So the FCA is scrutinizing historic motor finance agreements. They're looking specifically at discretionary commission arrangements where brokers might have inflated interest rates to increase their own payouts.
Okay, so the regulatory action is legally targeted at the massive lenders, right? The finance houses who actually approved those agreements.
Yes, the lenders are in the crosshairs. But the economic impact just cascades right down the chain to the retailer.
Of course it does.
The report details how dealers are suddenly facing this massive data and evidence burden. They are basically forced to dig through physical archives, review these antiquated customer relationship management systems, and hunt down historic records just to help the lenders assess these cases.
Because the lenders aren't going to quietly absorb massive fines or payouts without demanding full documentation from the dealer who brokered the loan in the first place.
Exactly. They will go down without a fight. Trade bodies are actually stepping in to issue guidance just to help dealers prepare for this huge administrative nightmare. And beyond the paperwork, there is a very real financial threat.
Which is?
Dealers are being advised to urgently review their broker-lender contracts for indemnity clauses or clawback clauses. Because if a lender is forced by the FCA to pay out a settlement, the contract might allow the lender to claw that exact sum of money back from the dealer.
Jeez. So the risk really just flows downhill.
It does. Now, one memorable detail from the analysis does offer a slight reprieve. The expected claim volumes are actually lower than initially feared.
Oh, that's good. Why?
Well, the scheme cleverly excludes zero-interest agreements entirely, and it implements a de minimis threshold. That's basically a baseline limit designed to toss out tiny, insignificant claims and prevent the system from getting clogged with minor disputes.
Okay, so the total number of claims shrinks, but the existential threat to the individual dealer still remains. Because the economic reality is that lenders will seek to squeeze the dealer networks to recover whatever capital they lose.
Precisely. And the early cases handled under this scheme will set the template for evidence standards and cost recovery attempts. The unresolved legal question hanging over this analysis, however, is whether dealers are actually being treated fairly under this framework. The line between a lender's responsibility and a broker's liability remains a heavily contested legal issue.
Right. So let's take stock of the board for a second. Dealers and automakers are staring down unsold EV inventory. They are navigating tariff pressures, they're eating import costs, and they're practically drowning in regulatory compliance audits.
Yeah.
Where do they find the cash to survive this squeeze?
Well, they have to rethink their internal operations entirely. According to an operator's playbook published on the subject, the answer lies in turning operational efficiency into hard cash. They do this through a framework called Profit First AI.
Okay, I have to push back on the industry hype here because every single company claims they are, quote unquote, doing AI. But for most, it seems like they are just throwing a generative chatbot at their customer service portal and issuing a press release. I mean, to actually save a business, this has to be about literally rewriting the plumbing of the enterprise.
Well, the playbook makes that exact argument. AI in auto retail must be explicitly tied to the profit and loss statement. If it fails to move the financial needle, it's really nothing more than a costly tech experiment. The analysis warns that activity is frequently mistaken for outcomes. You see companies running these unfocused, siloed pilots without any clear path to generating actual cash flow.
Okay, so let's break down the mechanics. What does Profit First AI actually look like when it's applied correctly?
It requires strict top-down governance. Boards of directors need to treat AI oversight as a core fiduciary duty, carrying the exact same weight as capital allocation or cybersecurity. And the playbook categorizes this into 4 specific quadrants. First is efficiency, so eliminating waste and reducing unit cost. Second is process reimagination. That means completely redesigning workflows from the ground up, rather than just, layering new algorithms on top of broken legacy steps.
Right, makes sense.
Third is product intelligence, embedding continuous learning directly into the lifecycle of the vehicles. And fourth is business model evolution, building entirely new data-driven revenue streams.
Okay, that is a really solid theoretical framework, but I want to know how software actually spots physical waste and turns it into money.
The playbook highlights a veteran software leader named Mamatha Chamarthi to demonstrate the mechanics of this. She applied this exact profit-first model at Goodyear and delivered $100 million in measurable value within a span of just 90 days.
Wait, $100 million in under a financial quarter. How does an algorithm accomplish that in a manufacturing and retail environment?
By applying predictive analytics directly to their supply chain and commercial systems. Think of it like having a million auditors watching every shipping route, pricing model, and inventory shelves simultaneously.
Oh,
Right. If a weather pattern delays a cargo ship, the AI instantly redirects a shipment of raw materials from another facility to prevent a factory shutdown. It dynamically adjusts pricing based on real-time market demand, basically cutting out the operational bloat that humans simply cannot track at scale.
so it is like recycling the exhaust heat from an engine to power the vehicle's air conditioning. You take the wasted time, the lost inventory, the operational friction, and you convert it directly into usable energy. The playbook calls this the harvest to invest flywheel, right?
That is a brilliant analogy, yes.
Okay.
You harvest the savings, you unlock the trapped operational value, all the waste and the inefficiencies, turn it into cash, and then use that cash to fund your further technological modernization. You prove the unit economics in a matter of weeks, and then you scale what works across the entire enterprise.
But there is a practical hurdle omitted from this playbook, because what this analysis doesn't answer is the exact upfront cost or the technical infrastructure required for an average regional dealership to actually implement these complex outcome-based contracts. I mean, an international tire manufacturer has a very different budget and engineering team than a family-owned auto group.
That's a fair point. The scale is vastly different, even if the underlying principles of finding and harvesting waste remain exactly the same.
So we have covered the factory floor, the secondary market, the regulatory offices, and the boardroom. Let's synthesize this whole journey for the listeners.
Yeah, looking across all these sources, three massive themes emerge. The first is adaptability as survival. We see this clearly with GM pulling the plug on Factory Zero's EV output when the primary market shifted, and we see it with Mercedes shifting billions of dollars to Alabama to build hybrids and dodge tariffs. If you cannot pivot your manufacturing footprint, you will sink.
Definitely. And the second theme is what we talked about earlier, the downstream risk cascade.
Exactly. The regulatory environment is incredibly interconnected. We see this evidenced by the FCA Finance Redress Plan. A macro-level rule aimed at giant lending institutions immediately cascades down to become a micro-level administrative and financial nightmare for local dealers.
And the third theme is margin protection through technology.
Right. With all these external pressures, the only way to protect profit is to look inward. That's highlighted by the AI playbook's focus on enterprise efficiency. You cannot control international tariffs, and you cannot dictate fuel prices, but you can control your own supply chain waste.
And alongside those themes, the industry is wrestling with two glaring tensions. The first is the EV market split. We have this stark contradiction between the primary and secondary markets. I mean, on one hand, you have GM literally idling a factory and pausing brand new EV truck production. But then on the other hand, the next year data shows funding for used EVs exploding by 157%. The demand hasn't vanished. It has just migrated to a price point that legacy automakers are struggling to serve.
Spot on. And the second tension is the gap between legal targets and economic reality. The FCA's legal target is the massive lender. But the economic reality is that the local dealers might be the ones who ultimately pay for it through those contractual clawbacks and administrative burdens.
So here is the practical takeaway for you, the listener. Whether you run a dealership lot, manage a global supply chain, or oversee a manufacturing floor, you have to adopt that harvest to invest model. The margin for error is gone. You need to look at your own internal processes, find your trapped operational waste, turn it into cash, and use that cash to fund your future. You cannot wait for the market to stabilize because volatility is the new baseline.
It really is. And it leaves us with one final provocative thought to mull over. As we move into an era where vehicles become entirely AI-defined, meaning their software dictates their capability as much as their physical hardware will, the ability to seamlessly update, patch, and optimize a car over its entire lifespan finally stabilize the wild swings we are seeing in used EV values.
That's a huge question.
Right. If a car can get smarter, faster, and more battery efficient 5 years after it rolls off the lot, the whole concept of vehicle depreciation might be turned completely upside down.
That is a fascinating concept and something that could permanently alter the calculus for every dealer and buyer out there. Thank you for joining us on Auto News Talk. As you step back into your day, keep that core question in mind. Where is your trapped value hiding? We will see you next time.